My name is Esther Suhr from Southern California, USA. This is the fifth part of a series of Bible studies on apologetics. Today's topic is part 5. Was Jesus even real? And you can see all the titles. Number 1, Origin of Worship, where it went wrong. Number 2, 5, Method of Apologetics. Number 3 is there any evidence for God? Number 4 is why should I believe the Bible is accurate? And today's topic is number 5, was Jesus even real? And number 6, why should I believe in the resurrection? And number 7, how can you believe there is only a way to God? And if you're blessed by these videos, I will provide my email address, and you could request to join the band called Virtual Bible Communications, where it provides a whole host of Bible discussions in greater details. And what is the historical evidence that Jesus Christ lived and died? Today, some claim that Jesus is just an idea rather than a real historical figure, but there is a good deal of written evidence for his existence 2,000 years ago. And if you would look at Robert Powell as Jesus of Nazareth in the 1977 TV miniseries, or I believe it's also available on Netflix, you will have a much greater detail of information about Jesus. And how confident can we be that Jesus Christ actually lived? The historical evidence for Jesus of Nazareth is both long established and widespread. Within a few decades of his supposed lifetime, he is mentioned by Jewish and Roman historians as well as by dozens of Christian writings. Compare that with, for example, King Arthur, who supposedly lived around 500 AD. The major historical source of events of that time does not even mention Arthur, and he is first referred to 300 or 400 years after he is supposed to have died. The evidence for Jesus is not limited to later folklore, as are accounts of Arthur. And what do Christian writings tell us? The value of this evidence is that it is both early and detailed. The first Christian writings to talk about Jesus are the epistles of St. Paul, and scholars agree that the earliest of these letters were written within 25 years of Jesus' death at the very latest. While the detailed biographical accounts of Jesus in the New Testament gospel dates from around 40 years after he died. These all appeared within the lifetimes of numerous eyewitnesses and provide descriptions that comfort with the comport with the culture and geography of first century Palestine. It is also difficult to imagine why Christian writers would invent such a thoroughly Jewish savior figure in a time and place under the aegis of Roman Empire, where there was strong suspicion of Judaism. And what did non-Christian authors say about Jesus? As far as we know, the first author outside the church to mention Jesus is the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, who wrote a history of Judaism around 93 AD. He has two references to Jesus. One of these is controversial because it is thought to be corrupted by Christian scribes, probably turning Josephus's negative account into a more positive one. But the other is not suspicious, a reference to James, the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. Advertisement. About 20 years after Josephus, we have the Roman politicians Pliny and Tacitus, who held some of the highest offices of state at the beginning of the second century AD. From Tacitus, we learn that Jesus was executed while Pontius Pilate was the Roman prefect in charge of Judea, 26 to 36 AD, and Tiberius was emperor, 14 to 37 AD. Reports that fit with the time frame of the Gospels. Pliny contributes the information that where he was governor in northern Turkey, Christians worshipped Christ as a god. Neither of them liked Christians. Pliny writes of their pig-headed obstinacy, and Tacitus calls their religion a destructive superstition. Did ancient writers discuss the existence of Jesus? Strikingly, there was never any debate in the ancient world about whether Jesus of Nazareth was a historical figure. In the earliest literature of the Jewish rabbis, Jesus was denounced as the illegitimate child of Mary and a sorcerer. Among pagans, the satirist Lucian and philosopher Celsius dismissed Jesus as a scoundrel, but we know of no one in the ancient world who questioned whether Jesus lived. How controversial is the existence of Jesus now? In a recent book, the French philosopher Michael Onfray talks of Jesus as a mere hypothesis, his existence as an idea rather than as a historical figure. About 10 years ago, the Jesus Project was set up in the U.S. One of its main questions for discussion was that of whether or not Jesus existed. Some authors have even argued that Jesus of Nazareth was doubly non existent, contending that both Jesus and Nazareth are Christian inventions. It is worth noting, though, that the two mainstream historians who have written most against these hyper skeptical arguments are atheists. Morris Casey, formerly of Nottingham University, and Bart Ehrman, University of North Carolina. They have issued stinging criticisms of the Jesus myth approach, branding it pseudo scholarship. Nevertheless, a recent survey discovered that 40% of adults in England did not believe that Jesus was a real historical figure. Jesus was on the side of the poor and exploited. Christian politicians should remember that. Brad Chilcott said, being on the side of the poor or excluded isn't about having progress values, the right opinions, or even voting the right way. It's about the decision to leverage any power, privilege, abilities, and resources you have to transform not only an individual's immediate circumstances, but more importantly, the economic, social, and cultural systems that perpetrate inequality, poverty, exclusion, and exploitation. Laws matter. National budgets matter. Policies matter because they not only reflect what society says is okay, but provide the framework on which structural inequality or social equality is built. We know that corporate greed, neoliberalism, and trickle-down economics are not working. We know that unfettered capitalism is destroying our planet and rapidly increasing inequality. We know that discrimination, whether due to race, gender, sexuality, or religion, makes individuals suffer, our communities less healthy, and our world less safe. In the Middle Ages, reading the Bible was not possible. For one, there was no printing presses, so there were no written documentations to read. Secondly, while the Catholics did not oppose people's reading of the Bible per se, they were opposed to the people reading interpretations the Bible apart from the teaching authority of the church, which would lead to the kinds of problems we have today with 30,000 denominations interpreting scripture differently. The Bible itself warns against this. 2 Peter 1:20. With the invention of printing, there was a communication explosion, and one suddenly saw lots of people making very poor and heretical translations of the Bible and popularizing them throughout Christendom. The church tried to stop this. There are situations where some of these poor translations of the Bible were burned. On the other hand, Marxism theory has seeped into the Western governments, education systems, and corporate structures, and spread their ideologies of Leninism and Maoism to say economic fairness to all, but is keeping everyone oppressed, enslaved, and certainly not fair to anyone but those few who controls. The term canon means that a book is approved for reading at the divine liturgy, that is, the Mass. This is what canon, a Greek word, mean. Rule, originally referred to the canonical books, were those books which were approved for reading at the liturgy. Books which were not approved for reading at the liturgy were called apocryphal or hidden, and so excluded from the liturgy. Among the apocryphal books were some were considered to be very orthodox and even inspired, but still not approved for public reading at the liturgy, and others were considered to be uninspired or to contain errors, or even to the outright heretical. Only the canonical books were approved for reading at the liturgy, the Mass. Before the late 4th century, each city church had its own local canon of the Bible, and these local canons differed from city church to city church. Some local canons, including books which are currently excluded from our present Bible, such as 1 Clement to the Corinthians, or the Epistle of Barnabas, or the Book of Enoch, etc. And some local canons excluding books which are currently excluded in our present Bible, such as the Epistle of James and Hebrews, and 2 Peter, and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation. The reason that that city churches had different local canons is because city churches had different local liturgies. That is, the liturgy form of worship in the city church of Rome was different from the liturgy form of worship in the city church of Corinth, or the city church of Ephesus, or Antioch, or Jerusalem, etc. This excluded the yearly liturgical calendar, with different city churches celebrating different local feast days on any given date. Is there any archaeological evidence for Jesus? Part of the popular confusion around the historicity of Jesus may be caused by peculiar archaeological arguments raised in relation to him. Recently, there have been claims that Jesus was a great-grandson of Cleopatra, complete with ancient coins allegedly showing Jesus wearing his crown of thorns. In some circles, there is still interest in the Shroud of Turin, supposedly Jesus' burial shroud. Pope Benedict XVI stated that it was something that no human artistry was capable of producing, and an icon of her Holy Saturday. It is hard to find historians who regard this material serious archaeological data. However, the documents produced by Christian, Jewish, and Roman writers form the most significant evidence. These abundant historical references leave us with little reasonable doubt that Jesus lived and died. The more interesting question, which goes beyond history and objective fact, is whether Jesus died and lived. 8 reasons Jesus definitely existed by Morris M. The quickest way to get a reaction in the modern world is to shout religion on a crowded server. From die-hard fundamentalists to rabid atheists, the internet is a breeding ground for lunatics, all of whom will throw the world's most condescending temper tantrum if you question their insanity. Luckily, when it comes to answering some of the most important questions in history, such as did Jesus really exist, we have centuries of work by scholars and archaeologists to build on. Such as Paul's epistles, St. Paul preaching in Athens. Using one part of the Bible to back up another might seem counterintuitive, but it's not as insane as it might first appear. For one thing, Paul's letters are the earliest writings on Christianity, predating the Gospels by some 50 years. Also, we know he existed. Textual analysis of the epistles proves at least 7 of them were written by one guy. And Paul's historic efforts to open the new church to Gentiles are the main reason you're not reading this in, say, Hebrew. But the biggest thing Paul has going in his favor is his ego. Rather than detail the life story of Jesus, Paul prefers talking about himself, including descriptions of his conversion and travels. Travels which, by the way, include 2 brief meetings with Jesus' brother James. Since James' existence would have been objectively verifiable to Paul's readers, the likelihood he made him up is somewhere around 0, especially since both meetings seem to go quite badly. Contradictions. Some see the final nail in historical Jesus's coffin, but for others, these screw-ups point in exactly the opposite direction. Take the Gospel of Mark several times. Mark quite clearly states that Jesus came from Nazareth. A few decades later, Luke and Matthew decide Bethlehem is where it started. Trouble is, there's no historical record of anything that they say happened there. The census, the slaughter of the innocents ever, happening. On the other hand, there does exist an ancient prophecy saying the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Not exactly subtle, is it? However, these shenanigans actually give more credence to Mark's account. It's called the criterion of embarrassment, basically. The idea that you'd be unlikely to make up something like something that makes you look bad. Since Nazareth is the wrong town for Jesus to come from, Mark would have claimed a fictional Jesus came from Bethlehem. That he didn't suggest his writing was at least grounded in reality. And the 6th, the baptism. Joachim Petinier baptism of Jesus, like a birth in the sticks, the baptism is another feature of Jesus' story that doesn't tally with biblical prophecy. At the time, the idea of a spiritually inferior person baptizing a superior one was completely unheard of. Having the Messiah baptized by anyone would have seen more as humiliation than humility. Nowadays, we see it as an early sign that Jesus was the humble guy he later turned out to be. But in ancient Judea, that would have been a hard sell. A writer looking to recruit people to his newly made up church would have probably had Jesus flying over the river, shooting fire and doing backflips while giving John the finger. The fact it's such a step down for the Son of God suggests it's probably based in fact, even if it's been distorted in the centuries. And Malachi 3:1, behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant whom ye delight in. John declared he was a prophetic voice for God that cried in the wilderness. John the Baptist was God's forerunner to the messiahship of Christ. John's baptism was God's way for Israel, who had gotten away from the moral requirements of the Torah, to accept and worship Christ as Israel's promised Messiah. This was prophesied by Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah 43, the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Jeremiah 23, verse 5, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. Zechariah 8, 3-8. Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, of holy mountain. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the street of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, if it be marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of his people, of this people in these days, should it be marvelous in mine eyes, saith the Lord of hosts. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will save my people from the east country, and from the west country, and I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, in truth and in righteousness. John the Baptist had a legal right, according to law, to sprinkle waters through purification, laws of purification, because he was a Levite by bloodline and birth. Christ called John the Baptist a reed shaking in the wind. Josephus. Josephus was a first century Roman Jewish historian whose most famous passage is the Testimonium Flavianum, an early reference to Christ that's probably a fake. So why bring him up at all? Well, Josephus's work also include a much less famous passage that's definitely genuine. Buried deep in Book 20 of his Antiquities of the Jews is a passing reference to the execution of the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James. That's as far as it goes. But like Paul above, it confirms the historical existence of James and therefore Jesus, and it's almost universally acknowledged to be genuine. Here's the world's leading scholar on Josephus explaining why it couldn't be a fake. It might tell us a very little, but it at least gives us a starting point, especially when combined with stuff like for Tacitus. Rome Tacitus in Inscur Mus Thermae Tacitus was the Roman equivalent of the History Channel and National Geographical, all rolled into one brainy, cynical guy. Over a stupefying number of books, his annals describe life under Tiberius, Nero, and other lunatics, while also dealing with day-to-day existence in Rome. Significantly, that includes a period surrounding the Great Fire. Though, for those of you who hate clicking on links, the important bit goes, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. That's the first reliable account of the crucifixion in history. Although he doesn't cite his source, Tacitus had access to a heck load of official documents and almost always noted when he was using hearsay. Since everyone but the most insane of scholars accept this passage as genuine, it establishes the crucifixion as a historical event, one widely known even by 64 AD. Furthermore, recently physical evidence was found proving the existence and presence of Pilate just where the Gospels say. Jesus discovery. Jerusalem archaeology reveals birth of Christianity. On the morning of Tuesday, June 29, 2010, outside the old city of Jerusalem, we made an unprecedented archaeological discovery related to Jesus and early Christianity. This discovery adds significantly to our understanding of Jesus, his earliest followers, and the birth of Christianity. In this book, we reveal reliable archaeological evidence that is directly connected to Jesus' first followers, those who knew him personally, and to Jesus himself. The discovery provides the earliest archaeological evidence of faith in Jesus' resurrection from the dead, the first witness to saying of Jesus that predates even the writing of our New Testament Gospels, and the earliest example of Christian art, all found in a sealed tomb dated to the 1st century CE. We refer to this tomb as the patio tomb, since it is now located beneath an apartment patio, 8 feet under the basement of a condominium complex. Such juxtapositions of modernity and antiquity are not unusual in Jerusalem, where construction must often be halted to rescue and excavate tombs from ancient times. The patio tomb was first uncovered by construction work in 1981 in East Talpiot, suburb of Jerusalem, less than 2 miles south of the old city. Our discoveries also provide precious new evidence for the son of Joseph's tomb, discovered in international 2007. Referred to this 1980 tomb as the Garden Tomb, since it is situated beneath a garden area in the same complex. Tombs both dating to around the time of Jesus are less than 200 feet together with a third tomb nearby that was unfortunately destroyed by the construction blast. These tombs formed a cluster and most likely belonged to the same clan or extended family. Any interpretation of the tomb has to be made in the light of the other. As a result, we believe a compelling argument can be made that the tomb is that of Jesus of Nazareth and his family. We argue in this book that both tombs are both likely located on the rural estate of Joseph of Arimathea, the wealthy member of the Sanhedrin, who, according to all four New Testament Gospels, took official charge of Jesus' burial. Who was Joseph of Arimathea, and how did he enter the historical picture? The Jesus Discovery explores the answers to this and series of related questions. The recent discoveries of the patio tomb put the controversy about the Jesus family tomb in new light. We now have new archaeological evidence, literally written in stone, that can guide us in properly understanding what Jesus' earliest followers meant by their faith in Jesus' resurrection from the dead, with his earthly remains and those of his family peacefully interred just yards away. This might sound like a contradiction, but only because certain theological traditions regarding the meaning of resurrection of the dead have clouded our understanding of what Jesus and his first followers truly believed. When we put together the texts of the Gospels with the archaeological evidence, the results are strikingly consistent and stand up to rigorous standard of historical evidence. Accessing the sealed patio tomb was a tremendous challenge. The technical challenge alone was daunting. And only access to this tomb was through a series of 8-inch drill holes in the basement floor of the condominium. We were not even positive these probes would open into the tomb. We literally had only inches to spare. Investigating the tomb required getting agreements from the owners of the building over the tomb. The Israel Antiquities Authority, which controls permission to carry out any archaeological work in Israel. The Jerusalem Police, whose task is to keep the peace and avoid incitements to riot. And the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox authorities, whose mission is to protect all Jewish tombs, ancient or modern, from any kind of disturbance. None of these parties had any particular motivation to assist us, and for various reasons they disagreed with one another about their own interests. Any of them could have stopped us at any point along the way, and there were many anxious times when we thought the exploration would never happen. Ultimately, we were able to persuade each group to support the excavation. That we succeeded at all is much more than a minor miracle. At the same time, we had no evidence that our exploration of this tomb, if it were possible, would yield anything of importance, but we both agreed it was a gamble worth taking. And at any point, the entire operation seemed likely to collapse. We pushed on, however, not because we knew what was inside the tomb, but because we could not bear the thought of never knowing. Since that time, we have begun to put the entire story together, and a coherent picture is emerging that offers a new understanding of Jesus and his earliest followers in the first decades of the movement. Archaeologists who work on the history of ancient Judaism and early Christianity disagree over whether there is any reliable archaeological evidence directly related to Jesus or his early followers. Most are convinced that nothing of this sort has survived. Not a single site, inscription, artifact, drawing, or text mentioning Jesus or his followers or witnessing to the beliefs of the earliest Jewish Christians, either in Jerusalem or in Galilee. Jesus was born, lived, and died in the land of Israel. Most scholars agree he was born around 5 BCE and died around 30 CE. We have abundant archaeological evidence from this period related to Galilee, where he began his preaching and healing campaigns, and Jerusalem, where he was crucified. There is evidence related to Herod Antipas, the high priest Caiaphas, and even Pontius Pilate, who had him crucified, but nothing that would connect us to Jesus himself or even to his earliest followers until now. Our hope is that these exciting new discoveries can become the catalyst for reconsidering other archaeological evidence that might well be related to the first Jewish Christian believers. The oldest copy of the New Testament Gospels date to the early 4th century CE, where over 200 years after Jesus' lifetime, there are a few papyri fragments of New Testament writings that scholars have dated to the 2nd century CE, but nothing so far in the 1st century. The earliest Christian art is found in the catacomb tombs in Rome, dating to the late 2nd or early 3rd century CE. Our discovery effectively pushes back the date on early Christian archaeological evidence by 200 years. More significantly, it takes us back into the lifetime of Jesus himself. This has been the most extraordinary adventure of our careers, and we are pleased to be able to share with readers the surprising and profound story of Jesus' discovery. And it goes on. Jesus' discovery shows how a recent major archaeological discovery in Jerusalem is revolutionizing our understanding of Jesus and the earliest years of Christianity. The story of a stunning new discovery that provides the first physical evidence of Christians in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus and his apostles. In 2010, using a specialized robotic camera, authors Tabor and Jabokovich, working with archaeologists, geologists, and forensic anthropologists, explored a previously excavated tomb in Jerusalem from around the time of Jesus. They made a remarkable discovery. The tomb contains several ossuaries or bone boxes, two of which were carved with an iconic image and a Greek inscription. Taken together, the image and the inscription constitute the earliest archaeological evidence of faith in Jesus' resurrection. Since the newly discovered ossuaries can be reliably dated to before 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, they also provide the first evidence in Jerusalem of the people who would later be called Christians. In fact, it is possible, maybe even likely, that whoever was buried in this tomb knew Jesus and heard him preach. The newly examined tomb is only 200 feet away from the so-called Jesus family tomb. This controversial tomb, excavated in 1980 and recently brought to international attention, contained ossuaries inscribed with names associated with Jesus and his immediate family. Critics dismissed the synchronicity of names as mere coincidence, but the new discovery increases the likelihood that the Jesus family tomb is indeed the real tomb of Jesus of Nazareth. Tabor and Jabokovich discuss the evidence in support of this interpretation and describe how both tombs appear to have been part of the property of a wealthy individual, possibly Joseph of Arimathea, the man who, according to the Gospels, buried Jesus. The Jesus discovery explains how the recent find is revolutionizing our understanding of the earliest years of the Christianity. Tabor and Jabokovich discuss what the concept of resurrection meant to the first followers of Jesus, particularly how it differed from the common understanding of the term today. Because the new archaeological discovery predates all other Christian documents, including the Gospels, it offers a dramatic witness to what the people who knew Jesus believed. There is no doubt that this is one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made. The Jesus discovery is the first-hand account of how it happened and what it means. Now, I know that was a very, very long passage that I read from two different books and blogs. But I felt it was very, very important to add to the authenticity and validity of this topic. And two modern religions. Kim Jong-un, despite most of the big ones having been around for centuries, new religions are always cropping up. Mormonism, Scientology, Rastafarianism, cults like the Manson family, or North Korea's creepy Kim cult, and nearly all of them have one thing in common. They stem from a single real individual. By contrast, movements with no grounding in reality whatsoever are much rarer. The sociologists have noticed this. By tracing now modern religions grow, they can make assumptions about their older cousins, including the importance of having a living, breathing figurehead. Think about it. It's a lot easier to get people on board your new movement if they can see your leader is an actual person and not, completely made up. But even if you don't accept the logic of that, it's worth remembering how utterly alien Jesus's teachings were compared to any of our branch of first century Judaism. Such a great mental leap had to come from someone somewhere, so Paul could get so fired up about it 10 years later. For all intents and purposes, you might as well call that someone Jesus. And the crucifixion. Peter Gertner, Crucifixion, Walters, for all his reported ability to kill things with the power of words, Gospels Jesus is basically the Aquaman of biblical figures. Compared to, say, King David, his awesomeness to piousness ratio is sadly lacking. And that's important because the Messiah was prophesied to be a warrior king who would flush the scum out of Jerusalem and bring out God's kingdom on earth. By contrast, Jesus rides around on a donkey and is executed before he can get anything done. Remember the criterion of embarrassment. In the first century, the crucifixion was a humiliating way to die. Anyone writing Jesus from the ground up would have had him go out in a one-on-one fist fight with Julius Caesar or something. As scholar Bart Ehrman puts it, the Christians did not invent Jesus. They invented the idea that the Messiah had to be crucified. Basically, early Christians were so embarrassed by the crucifixion, they did everything they could to turn it into a victory. Hell, They probably wish they had just made him up. It would have saved them a lot of trouble. And 6 things that prove God is real. Number 1, water, the human brain. Number 3, the complexity of birth and life. Number 4, nature. Number 5, the Bible. Number 6, the sun. So water, breath of fresh air. What's so amazing about water is that it is colorless, odorless, even tasteless, but no living thing can exist without it. The human body can survive without food for 21 days. However, 3 days without water and you're dead. At least 60% of the adult body is made of water, and every living cell in the body needs to keep functioning. On Earth, there is a constant system of purification that recycles and reuses water, sustaining every living thing on our planet. How could God not play a role in this complex but amazing process? There is no other answer. The human brain silence, solitude, Christian disciples hearing God. Did you know that the human brain processes more than 1 million messages a second, constantly deciding what's important and what isn't? According to Scientific American, across nearly 7 million years, the human brain has tripled its size, with the most growth occurring in the past 2 million years. Although each phase, human intelligence evolves and we develop more important functions that help us communicate and create mind-blowing things that continue to amaze the generations before us. The evolution and complexity of our brain proves that there is a deliberate designer who continues to deliver astonishing surprises. The complexity of birth and life, people, baby sleeping. Life continues to be one of the greatest miracles. There are so many elements, those components that go beyond the science and physical makeup of life. It's hard to deny God's reality when you think about the process of birth, that 2 beings can come together and create life, a process that is complex from the moment of conception. While there are over 7 billion people living in this world, no person has the same fingerprint. While identical twins share the same genetic components, they are unique individuals. How can there not be a unique designer? Is God real? Yes. Nature, open fields, sunbeams. Look all around you, the animals, the flowers, the plants, the trees. Everything in nature has a purpose. Think about it. When one animal is removed from nature and the food chain, it disrupts something else in the chain. On the other hand, think about the flowers. While there are hundreds of thousands of flower species in the world, most of them cannot be eaten. God clearly placed certain things on earth for necessity and other things for our own wonder and enjoyment. Nature is God's gift to his children. Not only does it provide us nourishment, but it also provides us with the opportunity to meditate, pray, and reset. The Bible blocking faith. While there are a number of religious books, the Bible is unlike any other. Isn't it amazing how 40 unrelated authors over a 2,000-year period could create a book about God's love for humanity with a consistent voice and message? Author Tim Chaffee, in the article Unity of the Bible, 7 Compelling Evidences, writes it perfectly, explaining the Bible's words point unerringly to Christ, who works on the cross was ordained by God, the true author of the Bible before the world began. God worked through each of these authors from different walks of life to create one of the most beautiful books ever written. 8 Bible verses that remind us God is in control. These verses about fear and anxiety remind us that God is in control. Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Psalm 46:1. God is our refuge and strength and an ever present help in trouble. Philippians 4:6-7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Psalm 94:19. When the anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. Psalm 94:19. Luke 12:22-26. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have They have no storeroom or barn. Yet God feeds them, and how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Revelation 1:17. Then he placed his right hand on me, and said, do not be afraid. I am first and the last. So that concludes the fifth portion. Was Jesus even real? If you still are doubting and not having enough information, then please contact me and I will pray with you. And really, believing is requiring humility. And I was your host. This is Esther Suhr. Thank you very much. And remember, be blessed and be healthy, spirit, mind, and body. Thank you.